Get out your spatulas, because in this episode of Made from Scratch, we're talking about assessment. Well, hey everybody, it's Dr. C, and this is the third video in our Made from Scratch series. It's a series where I'm designing a course from scratch. Happens to be an online course, but a lot of the things that I'm doing apply to face-to-face courses as well. In the first video, we did some early course organization tasks. In the second video, we looked at student learning outcomes and tried to make them meaningful and contextual and measurable. And now in this video, we're actually doing the measurement part. We're talking about assessment. Now, assessment gets a really bad rap in higher education, and that's a shame, because assessment can really be beneficial, and it actually can be a lot of fun too. So what I want to talk about today is take a look at my student learning outcomes and identify what are the best ways to know whether or not my students have met those student learning outcomes. I want to design my assessments so that at the end of the semester I know that my students are able to do the things that I've written out in my student learning outcomes. So I'll take a look at the student learning outcomes that I wrote for this course and then decide on what the assessments for those particular student learning outcomes will be. So in the last video we said that we'd be bringing back the course direction document. Well, here it is. I've redone it on the computer this time, and I included the new student learning outcomes that we wrote in the last episode, and they are right here. And then on this side of the document is where I'm going to write the different types of assessment that I'm going to use to make sure that I'm testing whether or not the students are meeting those student learning outcomes. So for each one of the student learning outcomes that I wrote, I have a couple of ideas of what I'm going to do for assessment. So as you can see, one of the student learning outcomes is for the students to compare the social, cognitive, physical, and emotional development of typically developing adolescents and atypically developing adolescents. So how would I measure, how would I know whether or not students are able to make those comparisons? Well, sure, I could test them, but I might not really get a good indication of whether or not they can compare theories of atypical and typical development. I can test maybe whether they can recollect, but maybe not whether they can compare. So I'm thinking that what I'm going to use, especially since this is an online course and very well set up to do it, I'm going to use discussion boards, probably on a weekly basis, and also have discussion leaders. I am going to be using groups in this course, so I do want to have opportunities for those groups to lead the discussions. It gives them a different perspective on the discussion and a little bit more ownership of what they're doing. For the second student learning outcome, they're going to apply adolescent development theories to the understanding of atypical adolescent development. Now for this one I thought, I want to make sure that they're putting out something that other people can read. I think that students often improve their quality of work when they know it's going to be viewed by a lot of people. So I do want the groups to create a website about the topic that they're studying. Now remember, the theme of this course is adolescence thwarted, so they're going to be looking at typical adolescent development, which is what they'll read in their textbooks and all the resources I provide. But then they're going to compare it to situations where the adolescence has been thwarted, like poverty or child soldiers. In those situations, I do want them to have enough information and be able to apply the typical adolescent development theories to those phenomena, and I want them to present that information in a website. I want them to analyze thwarted adolescent experiences by integrating information on typical adolescent development, and in this I really want them to have a chance to look at research on adolescent development and on atypical adolescent development. So I'll provide them with some articles from journals, some articles from lay resources like newspapers, and have them analyze those in the context of what they're studying. I want them to reflect on their own adolescent development and make connections between their learning and their experiences. And for this I'm going to do journals. Journals are a great way to have students reflect, and I'll guide those journals. I'll give them questions to think about and things to write about each week. They could also do this in blogs. It kind of depends on how sensitive I think some of the topics might be. Develop empathy for adolescents who experience problems associated with thwarted adolescence. And again, we're going to do journals for this. I think that the opportunity to develop empathy requires reflection, and so I'm going to have them do that in their journals. One of the journals that I know I'm going to do is a letter. They're going to write a letter to their adolescent self, telling their adolescent self about the phenomenon that they're studying and how it compares to their own adolescent development. So that should be fun. And then I'm going to have them construct a plan for ameliorating problems associated with atypical adolescent development. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to have them write a paper about 5 pages or so, but it'll actually be a letter to a key decision maker. So if they're talking about child poverty, they might write a letter to somebody at UNICEF. Or if they're talking about child soldiers, maybe they'll write something to the UN. So those are the different ideas that I have for assessing whether or not students are meeting these student learning outcomes. I think this is going to be a lot of fun, and it should give me a clearer picture as to what skills the students are developing, what resources they're drawing on, and how they're applying their knowledge beyond the classroom. So those are the assessments that I'm going to use in my course. Now for the next video, I'm going to bring back the course directions document. It's really helpful. And I'm going to talk about this side of the course direction. These are the inputs for the course, all the different texts, activities, ideas, interactions that I'm going to use to help students then achieve these student learning outcomes that will be measured by these assessments. So I hope to see you next time, and in the meantime, all the best with your course design.